Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the flickering torchlight of an Egyptian tomb, where the air is thick with incense and the faint, musty scent of millennia-old parchment. You're crouching on the rough stone floor, a pottery shard balanced on your knee, its surface jagged against your fingertips as you press ink into its curves. This isn't just any message, it's a letter to the dead. And if you don't word it just right, you might accidentally invite Uncle Nebbit to haunt your barley harvest forever. You probably won't survive this. Not because the dead are vengeful, okay, sometimes they are, but because deciphering ancient Egyptian cursive after midnight is its own form of torture. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and local time. Let's see who's braving this ghost mail with me at 3 a.m. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The ancient Egyptians didn't just believe in the afterlife, they expected it to be annoyingly interactive. When someone kicked the bucket, they didn't vanish into some distant celestial VIP lounge. No, they hung around like that one relative who overstays their welcome, peeking over your shoulder as you divvied up their inheritance. And if you wronged them, oh, they'd let you know. Historians still argue whether these letters were heartfelt pleas or passive-aggressive guilt trips. But one thing's clear, the dead were involved. Take poor Kenherkepshef, whose widow, Lady Tamehotep, sent him a scathing post-mortem review after he left her with a mountain of debt. "You couldn't even haunt properly," she basically wrote. And here's a quirky tidbit. Some letters were scrawled on broken pottery because Papyrus was too fancy for ghost complaints. Imagine slamming a beer mug, grabbing a shard, and angrily scribbling, "Dear Anubis, please evict my dead husband." The dead weren't distant deities to the ancient Egyptians. They were more like nosy neighbors who never moved away. You'd feel their presence constantly, like when a sudden chill ran down your spine during dinner or when the oil lamp flickered without a breeze. They weren't just watching, they were judging. And if you forgot to leave out their favorite honey cakes on the anniversary of their death, oh, they'd make sure you regretted it. Archaeologists have found letters where living family members basically tattle on each other to deceased relatives. Picture this. You're arguing with your brother over who gets dad's favorite copper tools, and instead of working it out like adults, you grab a pottery shard and snitch to your dead father in writing. "Dear Dad in the Do-It, Khufu won't share the plow. Make him stop being greedy or I'm skipping your tomb offerings next week." Historians still argue whether these were sincere spiritual communications or just elaborate guilt trips. But the sheer pettiness of some letters suggests ancient Egyptians knew exactly how to weaponize the afterlife. One particularly sassy example from Deir el-Medina reads like a Yelp review for a ghost. "If you don't stop letting scorpions into my bed, I'm telling Osiris you cheated at Senate." Here's a mainstream fact. These letters were often placed in or near tombs, sometimes tucked into the folds of the mummy's wrappings like cosmic post-it notes. The more important the request, the closer they'd place it to the body, because nothing says urgent like shoving a complaint under a 3,000-year-old bandage. And for our quirky tidbit, some letters included miniature models of the items being requested. Found one where a man sent his dead wife a clay figurine of a bed, the ancient equivalent of texting "we need to talk" with a mattress emoji. You're elbow deep in flour, kneading dough for the weekly offering to your dead grandmother, when suddenly, smack, a clay pot shatters on the floor behind you. Your heart leaps into your throat. That wasn't the wind. That was her. And she's clearly pissed about something. Welcome to the ancient Egyptian version of paranormal activity, where ghosts didn't just rattle chains. They threw tantrums over poorly seasoned bread. Every loaf you baked, every jug of beer you poured wasn't just tradition, it was hush money for the dead. Skimp on the quality, and suddenly your crops fail, your livestock gets sick, and your sandals mysteriously disappear every morning. Historians still argue whether these food offerings were acts of devotion or supernatural extortion. But the letters don't lie. One particularly desperate note from a farmer reads, "Dear ancestors, if you make the Nile flood properly this year, I'll give you extra honey cakes. But if my fields stay dry, I'm telling everyone about that time you stole Pharaoh's wig." Here's a mainstream fact. These food offerings were so vital that temples employed full-time Ka priests, whose sole job was to feed the dead daily. Imagine clocking in at 9 a.m. to serve steak to a mummy, then getting haunted for using cheap cuts. And for our quirky tidbit, archaeologists found a letter where a man promised his dead wife the good beer if she'd stop making his new girlfriend's hair fall out. Turns out, Afterlife negotiations were the original dating app. The flicker of your oil lamp casts long shadows as you press the reed pen into clay, your fingers trembling. Not from fear, but from sheer audacity. You're about to blackmail a ghost. Ancient Egyptians didn't just ask their dead relatives for favors. They negotiated like underworld lawyers, with all the subtlety of a sledgehammer to a tomb wall. Found a letter where a son threatens to stop mummifying his father's favorite cat unless the old man's ghost fixes his love life. Another straight up says, "Stop haunting my dreams about your funeral or I'll let rats eat your Ashabdis." Historians still argue whether this was spiritual reciprocity or cosmic hostage negotiation. But the sheer creativity of their threats is impressive. One widow mixed crocodile dung into her husband's offering bread, the ancient equivalent of leaving divorce papers on a pizza, with a note. "Taste this and remember what happens when you flirt with tavern girls from beyond the grave." Here's a mainstream fact. Egyptians believed the dead needed physical sustenance in the afterlife, which made withholding offerings the ultimate power move. No bread? The deceased starved. No beer? They'd spend eternity sober in a realm of endless parties. And for our quirky tidbit, archaeologists found a letter where a man promised to send fresh linen every week if his dead wife would stop visiting his new bride wearing only a burial shroud. The original ghostly revenge porn. The reed pen scratches against the pottery shard as you compose the most audacious letter of your life. A lawsuit against a ghost. Your late father promised you prime farmland in his will, but your scheming uncle somehow ended up with the deeds. Now, with the harvest approaching, you're taking your case to the ultimate appeals court, the Hall of Osiris itself. Ancient Egyptians didn't just write polite letters to their dead. They dragged them into the afterlife's small claims court. Archaeologists have found legal petitions addressed to deceased relatives, complete with arguments, evidence, and not-so-subtle threats. One particularly fiery example reads, "If you don't make my brother return the oxen you gifted me, I'll tell Anubis about those secret gambling debts you hid from mother." Historians still argue whether these were actual attempts at posthumous litigation or elaborate guilt trips. But the legal precision is striking. Some letters reference specific inheritance laws, while others remind the deceased of promises made on their deathbeds. One widow even included witness statements from living neighbors to support her claim against her dead husband's estate. Here's a mainstream fact. Egyptian inheritance laws were remarkably progressive for their time, with women entitled to property, which made ghostly interventions all the more necessary when greedy relatives tried circumventing the rules. And for our quirky tidbit, a scribe's draft letter was found with multiple corrections. Turns out even professional ghostwriters struggled to find the right tone for "Give me back my damn goats" in formal hieratic script. The flickering lamplight catches the faint smudges where desperate fingers once gripped this pottery shard, now resting in a museum case. You lean closer, squinting at the hieratic script. These aren't neat temple inscriptions, but the messy, urgent scrawl of someone who really needed their dead aunt to stop cursing their love life. Archaeologists find these letters crumpled in tomb corners like cosmic post-it notes, stuffed between coffin planks, even wedged in mummy bandages. The dead apparently needed constant reminders about earthly obligations. One particularly well-preserved example from Deir el-Medina shows clear fold marks, as if the writer angrily shoved it into a jar before storming off to the Afterlife's complaint department. Historians still argue whether these were spiritual FedEx or magical spam mail. But the variety is fascinating. Some are elegant papyrus sheets with gold leaf edges for really important ghosts, while others are literally grocery lists with "P.S. Stop haunting me" scribbled in the margins. The most ironic find? A beautifully painted ostracon placed ceremoniously, right next to a trash pit full of identical broken pottery. Here's a mainstream fact. These letters provide unparalleled insights into daily Egyptian life, from inheritance disputes to bad harvests, because nobody sugarcoats their problems when complaining to ghosts. And for our quirky tidbit, one letter was found still sealed with a mud stamp, bearing the clear imprint of a thumb that missed its target. Some ancient Egyptian really said, "This complaint is official," with a wonky fingerprint. The scribe's workshop smells of wet papyrus and lamp oil as you dictate your message to the dead. But the professional writer keeps sighing and rolling his eyes at your word choices. "No, no," he tuts, dipping his reed pen. "We don't say 'you rotten corpse.' We say 'venerated ancestor whose wisdom still guides us.'" Turns out, ghostwriting was serious business in ancient Egypt. Illiterate clients would hire scribes to phrase their supernatural grievances with just the right mix of respect and threat. Some scribes got creative. Archaeologists found letters where the professional writers clearly added their own flourishes, like one that starts with 12 lines of poetic praise before casually dropping, "So about that donkey you stole from me in 1273 BC. Historians still argue whether scribes functioned as spiritual lawyers or just ancient ghost whisperers. But their influence is undeniable. The fanciest letters use legal terminology and temple-approved formulas, while the cheaper ones read like angry Yelp reviews. One particularly sassy example from a scribe's practice tablet shows crossed out lines where he clearly thought better of writing, "Your ghost smells like old onions." Here's a mainstream fact. Scribes trained for years to master different writing styles, hieroglyphics for formal temple messages, hieratic for daily use, and demotic for when you really needed to tell your dead wife she picked a terrible time to die. And for our quirky tidbit, a scribe's doodle was found in the margin of a letter draft. A little stick figure ghost with its hands over its ears. Even professionals got tired of family drama. The torchlight flickers as you unroll the papyrus. Your late husband's handwriting stares back at you, but something's off. The ink smudges in odd places, the phrases slightly unnatural, like someone trying too hard to sound like him. Then it hits you. This isn't his ghost writing back. It's hers. That tavern girl he always swore meant nothing. And now she's answering his widow's letters from beyond the grave. Ancient Egyptian ghost mail wasn't always one way. Sometimes, whether through dreams, omens, or suspiciously convenient replies from temple mediums, the dead would answer. Archaeologists found one particularly juicy exchange where a widow's complaint about missing jewelry was answered with a rambling message about how her husband's ghost totally didn't give those lapis lazuli earrings to a dancer named Merritt. Sure, Jan. Historians still argue whether these were genuine spiritual experiences or the ancient equivalent of phishing scams. But the emotional whiplash in these correspondences is palpable. One letter shifts from tearful begging to all-caps rage in 3 lines when the writer realizes Great Uncle Nebamin's ghost keeps asking for beer money. Here's a mainstream fact. The Egyptian concept of Aku meant the dead could actively intervene in earthly affairs, which made every strange coincidence someone's great-grandfather's fault. And for our quirky tidbit, a love letter to a deceased wife was found with 2 very different replies. One sweet, one scorchingly angry, written on the same papyrus in different inks. Someone was ghostwriting ghosts. The candle gutters as you squint at the latest message from your ancestors. 3 papyrus sheets filled with afterlife bureaucracy that makes tax records look exciting. Concerning your request for increased harvest yields, please submit Form 17B to the Western Souls Department, obtain approval from 2 underworld notaries, and allow 6 to 12 mortal years for processing. You groan. Even dead, Great Aunt Tia loves red tape. Turns out, the ancient Egyptian afterlife had all the efficiency of a celestial DMV. Letters reveal ghosts complaining about underworld paperwork, from misplaced offering receipts to disputes over who qualified as properly mourned. One particularly petty spirit allegedly sent back a deceased merchant's entire funerary boat because he forgot to declare his imported Canaanite wine. Historians still argue whether this reflects actual spiritual beliefs or just Egyptians projecting their earthly frustrations onto eternity. But the consistency is remarkable. Multiple letters reference the same convoluted processes, like needing 7 witness signatures to transfer afterlife property rights. Here's a mainstream fact. The bureaucracy obsession mirrored Egypt's real-world administration. They invented the first civil service, so of course death came with triplicate forms. And for our quirky tidbit, archaeologists found a letter where a ghost allegedly complained his tomb statue wasn't workplace appropriate because it showed him smiling. The original HR violation. The palace corridors echo as you pace, the weight of the cedar box in your hands far heavier than its gilded contents. Inside lies a plea scratched onto electrum foil, a king's desperate letter to ancestors who apparently can't be bothered to prevent his dynasty from collapsing. Even pharaohs got ghosted. When your entire civilization depends on divine right, you don't just send thoughts and prayers to troublesome ancestors. You send threats wrapped in precious metals. Archaeologists found royal cachettes stuffed with angry missives to dead predecessors. If you don't make the Hittites back off, I'm chiseling your name off every monument. One New Kingdom pharaoh allegedly sent his mummified father's favorite war crown to the front lines with a note, "Earn this." Historians still argue whether these were state propaganda or genuine royal panic attacks. But the sheer pettiness transcends time. Ramses III's archives include a complaint that his great-grandfather's ghost kept distracting the oracles during important battles. Here's a mainstream fact. Pharaohs employed entire letters to the dead departments, scribes who specialized in passive-aggressive divine correspondence. And for our quirky tidbit, Cleopatra's alleged, but probably fake, suicide note to Augustus was written in honey, so ants would eat the words. The original disappearing message. The desert wind howls through the army camp as you press the amulet to your lips. The last gift from your wife before the Nubian campaign. Now, 6 moons later, her ghostly replies arrive in dreams, whispering that she's found work as a singer in Osiris court. The details are suspiciously specific. The linen she wears, the exact shade of her eye paint, until she mentions the harpist's name. Merit, your dead childhood sweetheart. The afterlife's worst rom-com is unfolding in your sleeping mind. Love letters to the dead blurred into supernatural soap operas. Archaeologists found soldiers pleas tangled with jealous accusations. You said the field of reeds had no other men, yet Ta's messenger saw you weaving garlands for that scribe from Abydos. One widower's letter devolves into a 3-page rant about how his wife's ghost keeps visiting his new bride wearing his old pectoral necklace. Historians still argue whether these were manifestations of grief or the ancient world's most creative breakup letters. But the emotional rawness cuts through millennia, like the veteran who promised his deceased love 7 fresh lotus garlands daily if she'd stop appearing in his barracks smelling of someone else's perfume. Here's a mainstream fact. Egyptian women could initiate divorce, which may explain why some ghost wives seemed so done with their husband's nonsense. And for our quirky tidbit, a love spell was found scribbled on the back of a ghost letter. Someone tried to haunt their ex's new relationship. The marketplace bustles around you as you haggle over the price of a funerary figurine. Not for your tomb, but as a gift for your dead father. The merchant smirks as he wraps it. Another bribe for the do-it? You don't laugh. Those Ushabtis aren't cheap, and Dad's ghost has been slacking on his end of the deal. Ancient Egyptians ran the afterlife like a supernatural gig economy. You supplied bread, beer, and shiny figurines. The dead were expected to pull divine strings in return. Archaeologists found letters that read like performance reviews. Since receiving my last offering, you've only fixed half the irrigation ditch. 3 more poor harvests, and I'm donating your tomb goods to the temple. One particularly petty note lists every offering given over a decade, with a final tally of 13 unanswered requests inheritance dispute. Historians still argue whether this was reciprocal piety or the world's oldest subscription service. But the contractual language is startling. Some letters specify exact offering quantities down to the grain, with penalty clauses for ghostly underperformance. Here's a mainstream fact. Ushabti figurines came with inscribed work contracts. The dead literally had afterlife jobs. And for our quirky tidbit, a merchant's ledger was found with 2 columns, offerings sent and favors received. The latter column was suspiciously empty. The oil lamp flickers as you stare at the blank pottery shard, hesitating. 3 letters sent, 3 lunar cycles passed. Not a single dream visitation, no mysterious signs, just silence. Either your mother's ghost is ignoring you, or the underworld postal service lost another delivery. For all the elaborate rituals, many ghost letters vanished into the void like cosmic spam. Archaeologists find drafts where writers clearly tried different tactics, shifting from flattery to threats to guilt trips. If you won't help me, at least explain why. Is it the quality of the bread? The frequency of visits? One abandoned ostrakhan ends mid-sentence. Fine. Enjoy eternity with no. The rest is lost to a frustrated palm smear. Historians still argue whether silence meant disapproval or simple bureaucratic delays. Some texts suggest the dead needed years to process requests. But the human frustration transcends time. like the scribe who added a postscript to his client's fifth unanswered letter. Maybe try spelling her name right this time? Here's a mainstream fact. Egyptians believed the dead could be temporarily unavailable during soul transformations. The original out-of-office reply. And for our quirky tidbit, a temple waste pit contained 30 nearly identical letters to the same ancestor. Someone really wanted grandma to cure their gout. The medium's tent reeks of myrrh and desperation as she channels your great-uncle's ghost. You lean in as her voice drops an octave, then stiffen when she claims he wants 300 deben of silver and a new sarcophagus. Suspicious, since you know his mummy's rotting in a looted tomb somewhere. The medium's eyes dart to your purse. Some things never change. Modern psychics continue the letter to the dead tradition with upgraded grifts. YouTube mediums today claim to receive replies via orbs, dust motes, and EVP, radio static, though the messages suspiciously align with clients' credit limits. One viral video showed a channeled Egyptian ghost complaining about pyramid Wi-Fi speeds. Historians still argue whether ancient seers were equally shady, but the parallels are uncanny, like the New Kingdom oracle caught faking spirit writing until a real priest recognized his dead wife's actual handwriting and temper. Here's a mainstream fact. Ancient mediums used token systems. Clients would bring personal items for the dead to identify, much like modern psychics sense wedding rings. And for our quirky tidbit, a Ptolemaic lawsuit accused a medium of charging extra to expedite messages to the afterlife. The original priority shipping scam. The last embers of your lamp gutter as you tuck the final letter beneath your pillow. Not to a ghost, but about them. 3 pages detailing every unanswered plea, every vanished offering, every dream where Aunt Merritt just had to comment on your life choices. Tomorrow, you'll slip it into her tomb's offering niche. But tonight you smile, imagining her ghost struggling to sleep as your words echo through the duet. The circle is complete. After millennia of one-sided conversations, you've turned the tables. Let her lie awake wondering why you've gone silent. Let her jump at every creaking floorboard. You blow out the lamp. The darkness feels lighter somehow. As the night deepens around you, picture those ancient letters resting in museum cases, not as artifacts, but as frozen moments of human longing. The ink fades, the pottery cracks, but the emotions remain startlingly fresh. Love that outlasted death, anger that defied the grave, and the stubborn hope that maybe, just maybe, someone's listening. The breeze carries the scent of distant lotus blossoms as you sink deeper into your pillow. Perhaps somewhere beyond the veil, a ghostly scribe is drafting a reply. Or perhaps, like so many before you, you'll meet only silence. And really, isn't that the most human ending of all?
you.